Picture this. Egypt, the blazing sun, and the shadow of the Great Pyramid. Armored knights, wearing the red cross of the Templars, are descending into a dark tunnel. This isn't Jerusalem, it's Giza, and the tunnel is one no local will even approach. What they find there doesn't belong in any history book. Not gold, not relics, but something older, something impossible. What if the Knights Templar found a secret beneath the pyramids so profound it didn't just reshape their order, but threatened to shatter the authority of the church itself? And what if the reason they were hunted down had nothing to do with gold, and everything to do with stone? Take a breath. Let the tension soften. This story isn't in the official records. It's carved in stone, whispered in ruins, and half-earsed by time. But it's waiting, just below the surface. In this journey, we're not chasing the Ark or the Grail. We're descending into tunnels beneath the ancient stone colossi of Giza, into chambers no one recorded, into secrets guarded by silence, sand, and time. Now, before we venture further into the shadows, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You don't want to miss a single secret that history has tried to forget. Let's begin. They weren't supposed to be there. When the Knights Templar first emerged, their purpose was clear: protect Christian pilgrims and defend the Holy Land. Egypt was outside the mandate, too far, too entangled, and yet whispers from overlooked Arabic and Crusader sources suggest that detachments of Templar knights moved quietly into Egyptian territory far earlier and more often than anyone admits. The standard narrative places them squarely within Jerusalem, but an unusual deviation begins to appear in logistics records around the mid-12th century. Supply caravans meant for Palestine inexplicably vanish off course, redirecting through the Nile Delta. Templar symbols appear in port manifests at Damietta and Alexandria, ports supposedly off-limits due to ongoing hostilities. Most tellingly, captured Templars, during early skirmishes in Egypt, seem to carry documents in Coptic, not Latin. Of course, official church histories dismiss these records as but there's something too patterned to ignore. Even Muslim chroniclers make passing reference to white-cloaked Franks moving through Egyptian deserts, not in open conflict, but as guests, or perhaps as students. Egypt was no Crusader playground, but political alliances in the 12th century were rarely about ideology. Power was the currency, and knowledge, especially hidden knowledge, could be traded just like gold. It's plausible that Templar commanders, acting outside church oversight, entered into quiet arrangements with Egyptian officials or esoteric circles. Here's the wrinkle that keeps historians up at night. The Templars were obsessed with sacred geometry, mystical numerology, and hidden knowledge. And Egypt had that in spades. If you were a knight secretly seeking what the ancients knew astronomy that rivaled Galileo, or rituals older than Genesis, you wouldn't go to Rome. You'd go to Cairo, quietly. One particularly obscure clue comes from a 12th century Templar inventory list recovered near Tyre. It mentions, between armor and incense, a single line that simply reads, "Manuscript received from the black-robed one of Musar." Musar being the Arabic name for Egypt. No further explanation. Just that, a hint, like a breadcrumb, dropped into the silence. What if the Templars' missions into Egypt weren't deviations, but the real objective? What if Jerusalem was just the cover story, and Egypt, the land of tombs and time, was the actual treasure hunt? It would make sense. The church would never approve of knights learning from infidels, let alone mystics. So, whatever they found there would have to stay buried. That silence both from the knights themselves and from the church that later burned. Burned them might be the strongest proof we have, because men don't keep quiet unless the truth is too dangerous to speak, or too sacred to betray. It began with an offhand mention in a footnote most historians skim past. A 13th century letter attributed to a Templar scribe referring to a scroll of papyrus, inscribed with sacred diagrams received from a Coptic intermediary near Alpha. The letter itself, long believed to be a forgery, has re-emerged thanks to digital preservation efforts. Suddenly, what once sounded like fiction now bristles with unsettling plausibility. The document, often referred to simply as the Cairo letter, is short, barely 3 paragraphs, but its contents point toward a clandestine exchange. A Templar officer named Hugo receives a bundle from the blind elder, wrapped in linen marked with a peculiar symbol, a circle nested within a triangle. Templar experts connect this to early initiatory diagrams. The elder, described as a keeper of the wells beneath the stones, demands no payment, only silence. What's more, the letter S phrasing includes references to those who predate the pharaohs and the House of the Horizon, a name strongly associated with the ancient temple of a. That this terminology appears in a Latin letter written by a Knight of the Cross suggests the Templars weren't merely collecting maps or relics. They were being drawn into a different cosmology entirely. Modern Egyptologists have long debated the extent to which ancient esoteric knowledge survived through Coptic transmission. While the mainstream view holds that Christianity erased the old ways, a growing minority believes that certain rites and diagrams were quietly preserved, repurposed into Christian metaphor, but never entirely lost. Some have dismissed the letter as a clever fabrication, but the physical characteristics of the documenta, ink composition, parchment texture, and stylistic Latin script all match 13th century standards. And then there's the watermark, a faint sigil only visible under ultraviolet light, matching the seal found on an ossuary unearthed near Giza in 1904. That ossuary oddly contained not bones, but scorched scraps of papyrus. Even more strangely, a marginal note on the back of the parchment written in Arabic script includes a warning: "He who opens the vault will not survive the song." Recall that the Coptic language was appearing on Templar field documents. This papyrus letter, then, is not an anomaly. It is part of a pattern, connecting knights to monks, pyramids to crosses. Perhaps the most chilling element is what Hugo doesn't say. The letter ends abruptly. No commentary, no fear, just this: "We will not write again. The light beneath the stone has changed us. Changed us." The phrasing alone is haunting. Not enlightened, not empowered, changed. And then silence. To this day, no further correspondence from Hugo de Montois has ever been found. It's as if the letter was not a beginning, but a final breath. The architecture of silence. It's easy to think of the Templars as confined to the battlegrounds of the Holy Land, swords drawn, fortresses bristling with defenders, but every so often, a map betrays an oddity, a fortification where no crusade was declared, a structure too European for its surroundings. And Cairo, old Cairo in particular, is littered with them. If you know where to look, beneath the modern traffic, the bones of Fustat, the medieval capital of Islamic Egypt, still whisper. Among its ruins lies an overlooked wall, a strange stone segment tucked behind the Church of Saint Cyr, bearing the faint outline of a cross whose proportions match the croix pate, the iconic emblem of the Knights Templar. Several structures in this older part of Cairo have floor plans inconsistent with Islamic design. There's the so-called Red House, a 2-story ruin with narrow vertical arrow slits uncommon in Egyptian architecture, but nearly identical to those found in Templar holdings in Tripoli. Its basement contains collapsed archways that descend into a vault sealed with what some claim was lead. Then there's the Tower of the Strangers, a squat stone block with no documented origin. Excavations around it in the 1930s revealed tools not native to the region: a Western-style spade, fragments of chainmail, and a single rusted Norman spur dated to the early 1200s. Taken alone, each artifact could be chalked up to trade or coincidence, but when viewed together, they form a curious ring around an ancient necropolis. Right at the center, a derelict subterranean water channel known as the Sorab Well, where, according to early Coptic records, men in white cloaks were once seen chanting in tongues foreign to the Nile. It is at this point that the line between architecture and ritual blurs. Several of these structures contain geometric markings that correspond to celestial angles, not unlike those found in Giza's pyramid complexes. One doorway, sealed with brass studs, aligns precisely with the setting sun on the summer solstice. The question arises: what were they doing here? It's tempting to frame it as reconnaissance, but the evidence suggests otherwise. These were not outposts. They were observation points, stations of silence, places not of war, but of waiting. Soere, we are 23 steps into a labyrinth of dust, blood, symbols, and silence. And now at last, the torchlight catches the final wall. You've traced the Templars across deserts and libraries, beneath obelisks and church domes. And now it's time to ask Na what they searched for, but what they found. Every sign, every anomaly, every fragment points to one conclusion. Beneath the pyramids, the Templars encountered something that wasn't just ancient. It was alive in meaning, not a relic, a revelation. The revelation was that history is not a line, it's a spiral. That the myths of Osiris, the rites of Horus, the Yangtze and the Cross's beam were all part of a single unbroken continuum. That beneath the dogma, beneath the silence, something still breathes. And the Templars, those pale riders with red crosses, didn't just stumble into this knowledge. They chose Italiano. They studied it, and in the end they sealed it not to protect themselves, but to protect the world from what it wasn't ready to understand. Their final act was not to hoard it, it was to hide it. In chests, never opened. In gospels, never canonized. In vaults, never mapped. In silence, what lies beneath the pyramids may never be spoken plainly. The Templars didn't just bury relics. They buried a mirror, one that reflected something older than empire, older than death. Let that mystery rest now, deep in the dark. The stones are still there, of course. They always are, and beneath them, the answer curls in shadow. Not to be solved, but to be dreamt. If this journey into the shadow of the pyramids captivated you, let us know. Hit the like button to tell the algorithm to keep digging up these secrets, and tell me in the comments, what do you think the Templars found? Thank you for watching.